Just tell us a little bit about your background. Where were you born? Where'd you go to school?
Okay, well, I told this smart fellow just left here, I said, born in Fort Worth. And went to, after that I went to Dallas as a scholastic, and went to school in Dallas, both high school, grade school, and completed school at pretty good sized high school in Dallas, 2,100 people. It wasn't small, and a very pretty school even today, even though it's on the wrong side of town. But Forest Avenue High, it's now named James Adam Madison. But it was good school, and it still is. So that basically is, after I got out of high school, then you want to go on a little
Yeah, where'd you go to college?
Well, I went from high school to A&M. And I went down to A&M at the time just before they were going to take me into service. And went down there mainly to play football. And we played that fall, and they took me in the Army in January. I was going through the Penal on January the 29th of the next year, 1943.
Were you drafted?
Yes, I was drafted. They quit taking enlisted. We tried to enlist in the Air Force. But
And tell me about your military service.
in the military, I went to I was a drill instructor, you might say, here in this country, and then went overseas. And we ended up in India and Miss America. Indians where I stayed most of the time, flying the hump. I wasn't flying the hump myself, but I was preparing the airplanes to fly the hump. Had a bunch of helpers, local people that put gasoline on the airplanes, and they flew the hump one flight right after the other. And that was basically, then somebody noticed I was doing a fairly good job. They reported me to a board. The board happened to be a board for OCS. And so I went before a board in India to go, whether to go to OCS or not. They recommended I be sent to OCS, which I went from there to OCS. And I was real pleased that the board even asked me would I be interested in going to West Point. And that was a real thrill. I wondered, of course at the time, I really wasn't interested because I was trying to get with a friend of mine who my son is named after now. Ernest Gentner was a high school classmate. And I was trying to get with him, and he was in France. And I was going to try to catch up with him, but he got killed in the Battle of Bulge. And then they sent me to Fort Benning. I went to Fort Benning and finished there. And went from there to Little Rock, Arkansas as an administrative field. I didn't go back overseas.
And then where'd you finish your education, George, after the service?
I came back and went to Tech, and I went under that 2-year plan at that time. And then I left Tech and went to UT, Austin.
For law school, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, George, how did you first develop an interest in the law?
I was sort of in the debate field and arguing last word. my parents always said I wanted to get the last word. And, it was right in a way. But I watch cases down in the courthouse in Dallas. I go down and watch lawyers who had a good name and watch them fight it out, try their case.
Were you interested in the criminal field early on, or just in being a lawyer generally?
Well, of course, I went from, I don't know how that goes, but I went in the FBI.
Right.
And that, of course, directed me in an interest of criminal law. And so I got interested there. And
you went to the FBI right after graduation from law school?
no, right after Yes, yes,
Uh-huh.
you're right. Right after graduation, I went to FBI in Washington, D.C. And I enjoyed that. In fact, I liked the FBI so well, I'd still be in it, but they didn't pay you any money, and they kept you away from home. You know, your family suffered. So anyway, I didn't stay in. I transferred to Seattle from Salt Lake City, and I said, this is time to go back to Lubbock. So
How did you decide to make Lubbock your home?
well, Chuck, I had an aunt who was on the original faculty at Tech, Johnny Gilkerson Langford, and she encouraged me, and we had a connection with Tech all the way around. My dad lettered at Tech, and my mother didn't go to Tech, but all of my aunts went to Tech, and they knew Jimmy Frank's dad, and all those people around the Tech campus. So it was a normal, natural thing.
You started out as a prosecutor, right?
Well, I went first with Hobart Nelson,
Oh, yeah.
Hobart and George.
Yeah.
I was the only other lawyer besides them. And they were great. Hobart was particularly good to work with. George was quite businesslike. And Hobart was too, when he went to setting fees and making the money. But anyway, Hobart and I got along real good. Finally, he took me in, I stayed a year, examined abstracts, which is terrible. And and then after that, I asked him, Mr. Nelson, this is George Nelson's dad, you know, that I'm talking to. I said, would you be real angry at me if I got a job with the county attorney's office? And he made a scowl, you know. He always made out like well, I'd be awfully disappointed, you know, all that kind of thing. But he wanted me to go because he thought he was a great prosecutor himself. So he encouraged me. I went over there in the DA's at the county attorney's office and ran into Jim Weeks and a couple other. And finally we had an opening over. Jim went to Abilene. I don't know whether you remember that. But Jim Weeks decided to go to Abilene and left the vacancy as a county attorney, and I was appointed in 1954 or 5. I'm not sure what. I was appointed.
You wound up being the elected district attorney.
Yeah, well, actually, when I had been in that office about a year, maybe 2 years. No, a little less than 2 years. The appointment, it ran out. I ran for district attorney, and I got elected, and so I started that, I remember that, January 1st, 1957, I was sworn in as district attorney.
Who was your opponent in that famous race?
Pat Moore.
You ran against a lady.
I don't know, I ran against Jim.
Jim Moore, okay. Jim Moore.
But she's a hustler, I'll tell you. I admired her.
Well, George, now, I tell you what, I've heard this story all my professional life, and I noticed that you've got a newspaper clipping. You had a reputation as a very aggressive, even pugilistic prosecutor. Tell us that.
I regret a little bit of that.
Tell us that story. Tell us that story.
I regret a little bit of it. You know, I know that this is, my wife pulled this out this morning, and my wife of 65 years, I might say, my childhood high school sweetheart. And she told me, said, you want to take this? I said, no. She said, go ahead and take it. Anyway, we were trying a case out in Judge Bean's court on the 6th floor, I think it is, of the court. Yeah, 6th floor. I was a district attorney on the 5th floor, and Judge Bean was on the 6th. And we had this routine case. Bill Gillespie was defending some drug dealer or something. But anyway, they sent an interpreter in there, a real nice young guy.
Marcos Hernandez.
Yeah, you know, he is a nice guy. And he took the stand. I wanted to cross-examine him and test his qualifications. And Bill was objecting to that. And all of a sudden, Judge Byron Chappell, his old partner, was out in the audience. And on the front row there, front bench, and he came around, he swung his door open, And he made some remark that I was trying to run the courtroom and I was trying to do this, do that. And he said, you need to shut up. And I said, you make me, and when one thing led to another. And I did, it was a mistake, which I regret, but I did hit him with a left. He backed up, thank goodness.
Lawyer Chappell told me, he said, from then on you need to carry a heavy clipboard to the courthouse for self-defense.
I didn't know he said that.
Yeah.
We took them out to eat the following Sunday, and hopefully it made up, because Brian and I never did have another argument after that. But it was one of those kind of things just happened.
Has that story grown in the intervening years? They told it to me one time that the Avalanche Journal called Judge Mean at home and asked him if he'd seen anything. He said he couldn't recall a thing, but he said he might have dropped a pencil and bent down to pick it up and missed something.
Judge Bean wrote out he had yellow pad and wrote every case out. And sure enough, he said, I dropped my pencil. I was down trying to get my pencil. I didn't see anything. And he might have seen it, but he didn't want to hurt either one of us.
I know.
He liked both of them.
Yeah.
So you wound up in private practice, and when did you start to your private practice? After leaving the DA?
Let's see, I went, my private practice began,
This
think how.
says you left the DA's office about 61.
So,
Yeah.
January '62,
Uh-huh.
I went with the Citizens National Bank. I really I wasn't ready to defend those ornery criminals. I just needed a little bit of transition. So I went to the Citizens National Bank as a trust officer. And I stayed there as a year with the bank, and they sent me over to banking schools and trust schools and got a good education, but that's about all I could take. So I got back into the law practice.
All right. And were you a solo practitioner? Did you have some
Yes.
partners?
We took Ed Smith, who was a trust officer at the Citizens Bank, and Doc Blanchard and Bill Clifford. Doc was a senator after that. But Doc and Bill Clifford and Ed Smith and myself were 4 partners.
Okay. And how did you get into defending those lousy criminals?
I felt they needed representation. They were too many of them getting mistreated, as I saw it later on. But and I began just I set pretty good fees, and if they paid them, well, I tried to do the best I could. But I had no problem with it. Leon Douglas, the state's attorney, said I'd file on my mother, but that wasn't true.
You had a reputation of never going to trial unless you actually wanted to go to trial.
That's true. I still feel that way.
And you were always prepared, or you wouldn't.
That's right.
You wouldn't go to trial unless you were prepared.
I have that feeling, Chuck, that you're taking up time if you don't have preparation. And the timing might not be right. The case I lost was the timing was bad. Chappell's partner, John McFall, represented this lady with a nursing baby, which is appropriate right at this time. Mm-hmm. And I objected to nursing that baby in the courtroom and sat there in the chair nursing that baby. It was right before Christmas, and the jury was just almost crying, And then I got harder and harder, and they got softer and softer. And about that time, outside, down below the courthouse window, they started playing Christmas carols. They had a car sale down there. Old cars helped the kiddies for Christmas. John McFall took full advantage of that, and he beat the car. They found him not guilty. It wasn't a bad case, but.
Tell me about the famous pocket motions that you
Yeah, that was an interesting way to. I found that you had to have some way to get back at the judges in a quick way, and so I drew up these pocket motions I folded them just right, and but the time when the judge made this remark that he did, which you ordinarily would have to let it pass because you couldn't get to it real quick, I'd throw the motion on the desk and walk away. and, and the judges would read it and turn red and turn red. Then I'd walk away and duck.
But that way you didn't have to do it in front of the jury.
Well, we did most of them. Yeah, that's true.
As far as the pocket.
That's right. We didn't have to say all those bad things about the judge in front of the jury.
Right.
The judge read it and turned red. But I said every bad thing ever written in a case about the wrongdoing of a judge.
Tell us some of your favorite war stories about cases that you've been involved in as a criminal defense lawyer.
I guess the one I think of first is Jimmy may have a list there. This case from El Paso, Percy Foreman. You try your cases almost based on the opposition you have, the lawyer. And like trying a case against Clifford Brown and Byron Chapel, I knew how those guys tried cases, and you had to be ready because they'd whip you. And so Percy Foreman, a fellow like that, you had to be ready for him. And so he came from Houston, and they're trying this Edenoff, Dr. Edenoff. Edenoff is the one who shot and killed the lawyer as he got off the airplane in El Paso. And Edenoff, at the time he ran up to the plane and shot him, had a bulletproof vest on. And he shot the lawyer 5 or 6 times, just bang, 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 and run out. And so we were trying him, and he was, of course, claiming that he was incapacitated. And we were trying to say that he was not, so to convict him. Mr. Foreman tried it. I think we tried it 6, 8, 10 days, and I believe it was Judge Bean's court. And we tried that case, and Percy got him found insane, at the time of the event. But we really gave him a trial. He wouldn't want to do it again. It was a bad case for him. He had seen some drawings that didn't do him justice in a sexual way. And he made up his mind. He thought it was in the divorce this lawyer produced them in. And so they thought that they'd put that on him, and he didn't take it. He put on his vest and went out looking for people, and even redrew the drawing that they had and published a new drawing. It was an interesting case.
I remember that you had a very active federal criminal defense practice.
Yeah, we had I had one. I guess I won one of the only internal revenue cases, unless you won one, Chuck. I don't.
No, I didn't know.
We had I never forget. We won that. Well, I won a couple of cases over at the federal court, but this internal revenue case was one where we just didn't think it could be won. And but the lawyer that hired me on it was Ed Smith, the CPA. And Ed was the most meticulous person I've ever seen. You came into his office and he took down an hour, 15 minutes, 10, and had all that added up over here. But anyway, I got through the case. I mean, we got down toward the end. And he asked me, he said, have you written out your argument? I said, no, I don't have a written out argument. He said, how do you know what you're going to say? I said, well, I've said it sometime before, most time. And so we made the argument, got through it, and he was amazed that you could do that, because Ed had never played, he played strictly by his notes, and his notes were perfect. But anyway, it was, then I had another case in federal court that there's a drug case. That old boy, he got acquitted, and he sent me things every year, and everything in the world. The rulers with my names on them. That was thing. But that was an interesting drug case. But and a fellow from Big Spring. And you just think of a bunch of them. But that's I didn't have any bunch, but I had a number of them.
And you were good friends with Judge Woodward, weren't you?
Oh yeah, I loved Judge Woodward. In fact, he was one of the really normal, nicest guys you'll ever meet, and all of y'all know that. That was consensus of the bar, that Judge Woodward could handle the situation and everybody be treated fairly. In fact, Ernest Langley and myself, Ernest was a great friend of mine up from Hereford. Ernest said, I think Judge holds against you and me because he likes us. I said, well, maybe that's true, you know. The judge is very careful, very careful.
And I remember when I first started practicing criminal law here, you were partners with Travis Shelton, and y'all were dynamite.
Yeah, we had a, you know, that does remind me of an incident. We had a case, Tom Purdom, who's a very able lawyer. And Tom Purdom made some comment in the record that said the two best lawyers in the state were on the other side, George Gilkerson and Travis Shelton. And I brought that out. I had him type it up. I put it to Tom. He said, that's right. That's right.
Well, I think one of the reasons we're here is because of your involvement in the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. I know you were one of the founding fathers. Why don't you tell that story?
All right. Well, that really happened. At the time, I was chairman, I guess you call it, of the Texas Bar Criminal Law Section. Yeah, I was trying to think of the name of it. The criminal law section consisted of three entities, basically defense attorneys, prosecutors, and judges. And I kept noticing you couldn't get anything done at all. You'd go to a meeting and everything would end up with a draw, you know. And you come out there and you just wasted your time. And that began to sort of get on my nerves about that, because at that time I was in the defense of the cases. And so I told, I said to someone, I don't remember who, but I said, we need to do something about that. So I suggested that we try to get a separate Texas criminal defense lawyer. I don't know what we called it, but that was it. But anyway, Tony Freelo down in Houston, who is a tremendously aggressive lawyer and a great fellow, he's dead. He's dead. Tony and Phil Burleson of Dallas. Houston and Dallas were about to get in a big fight over who would head up the Texas criminal defense lawyers. And so I looked over at a crowd one night. We were at the Shamrock Hilton Hotel in Houston, and I looked at it and I said, listen, let's solve this way. And I suggested to them that they put Tony in his second on the presidency, Frank Maloney in as the first president. Frank was from Houston and a real easygoing, likable guy, except when he got in the courtroom. And then my Dallas lawyer,
Phil Burleson.
yeah, Phil. Phil. So I said, let's just put it in that order, and 1, 2, 3, and I said, I'll be fourth. And that's the way it turned out, and it's the smoothest thing you've ever seen. Otherwise, it would have been, Houston brought a whole contingent of people to Dallas to the Bar Association meeting. They were ready to vote, and I mean hard. They would have taken it back to Houston, and we'd never had it.
Now, was Emmett from Austin? I thought he was from Austin.
Emmett, no, Emmett.
Coleman?
No, Coleman was Dallas. And I'm talking about
No.
Tony Freelo.
Frank Maloney. Frank Maloney.
Oh, Frank is from Austin.
Austin, right. And he was the first president.
Right.
Okay.
But he was, you know, at that time he was even more pliable than he is now. I think Frank's, is he having some difficulty?
As far as I know, he's been fine. He comes into the office every once in a while.
Is that right?
Yeah, we
Good.
see him.
Well, I would write him, I sent him a cap telling him how great he was. He just wrote me and thanked me. But anyway, we had a real good team, and it worked out. And I think even the ones after that, it's smooth as silk, and I'm so pleased with that, because that's what we needed. Yeah, if y'all know Tony Frito, he is a digger, and he'll get a crowd anytime.
You were a charter member of the association.
Of what?
You were a charter member of the association and the fourth president.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And you,
That
and
was
this,
sort of a,
and this followed on the heels of the years that you and Travis had spent working on the Penal Code Revision Committee, which you worked about 5-year project,
That's
1965
right.
to 1970.
revised the penal code. So I had a,
And that's the penal code that a lot of us younger ones started working with in January of '74.
that's correct. I think I took office as president in '74, didn't I believe?
Doesn't say that here, but I think that's
I
about
believe
right.
that, well, I know the '74 and '75 year was when I was in, that's when we originated The Voice, the magazine.
Mhm.
We originated a bunch of things, and banquet, an annual banquet. I can't think of that young man's name, but he was good. Executive director at the beginning. He's now in Austin representing people who have trouble with the bar, I think. But he was a real good executive director.
Did you have trouble? Did you have trouble at the beginning getting the membership to grow?
It started off with a pretty stable group, but it didn't go real fast. I thought we'd never get past 1,000, you know. But we had a sort of ready-made, people were ready for it. They really were. And I think they joined up. As you can see, we have our first members of the board and all, they were from the beginning. Yeah, we had no trouble, except we sort of wiped out everybody that wanted in got in, and then we had to sort of work to bring the others in. But it was very, we had money problems, financial trouble, but it worked out.
And you mentioned something to me that when the state bar committee split out into the different groups, that they continued to qualify for grants and things. Was that
Yeah, it's even grown bigger in that way. The judges have the grants now, and the prosecutors have tremendous grants, and we have grants. And so we've really done the right thing by having the prosecutors have their own and the district judges having their own. You sort of want to rub shoulders with the district judges, but on the other hand, if they're going to take all the money, and they had the influence, really, you might say. But I think the Texas criminal defense lawyers has come a long way. They've had some good leadership, good leadership. I wanted to be sure to mention Cliff Brown, now deceased. Cliff was, and our other Bill.
The Wishcamper?
Yeah, Bushcamper. They're ones from Lubbock that I was so proud of. But and
Danny Hurley?
yeah, I just couldn't think of the most recent one.
And Travis Shelton was president of the state bar of Texas.
That's true, he was, and he used his influence to put us in a good position with state bar.
What are some of your favorite memories of the early days of TCDLA?
I don't know, we just seemed like we were meeting all the time and sending out certificates. We were looking for permanency, something that you couldn't wipe out, and everybody would accept it as reasonably proposed. And I can't overemphasize how well it went.
Was Austin the first choice for the headquarters of
Yes, it was.
TCDLA?
And that's another reason we took Frank Maloney as president at the beginning, because Frank was in Austin, and it just worked out real good because he was there, and the other towns were very jealous of that, and that's another way we got out of that fight between Houston and Dallas. We said, no, let's do it with Austin. We really went geographically from the very beginning. But Tony Freelo he'd have had the thing all in Houston. he was so aggressive, but I loved him. Later on, he took me and tried to, got me all kind of grants and things like that I couldn't have gotten without him.
Tell us some of the people that you've met by being associated with TCDLA and criminal defense work that you remember.
Well, Racehorse Haynes, yeah, I bet I'm the only guy who got a certificate from Racehorse Haynes. One of those federal cases you're talking about. Racehorse and I went to a seminar out in Las Vegas, and he was representing one of those South Texas bad guys in Corpus Christi the following week, and I was representing this Mexican, Hispanic man about drugs the next week here in Lubbock. And so he tried his case, and they hit Racehorse pretty good, the jury did. And lo and behold, I got a not guilty. Well, what happens about a week or two later, I get a big certificate, about like this. Got a big racehorse on it, a horseshoe, and a racehorse award to George Gilkerson. It's the darndest thing I ever saw. And I was tickled. We sat together at the meeting, and I said, you should be up here telling what's going on. You know more about it than the speaker does. He said, no, I want to learn. I said, I'm sitting back here with you. So we sat there in 3 days at Las Vegas. Took our wife and had a great time.
And you were trying some of those drug cases in an era when the marijuana law had just been minimized down to, for the first time, to misdemeanors.
Yeah, let's see how that went, Jimmy. Did I get a life sentence on a marijuana, one cigarette? They said I did. I can't.
I think that occurred.
Yeah, well, I think the guy had it in his overalls, and it's just a little roach, as they call them. And sure enough, they gave. That was the funny thing. One lawyer was trying to see me outside the courtroom after that case, before the jury was out. And I finished my argument and I walked out trying to wipe the sweat off. And I said to that lawyer, I said, "Do you want to talk to me?" And he said, "Yeah, I thought about talking to you." He said, "Let's go here in the library." The law library used to be right next to the courtroom in the 72nd. So we went in. About the time we got in there, the jury knocked on the door and they said, "You have a verdict." And I said, "Okay, we'll be back." And so we didn't talk. So we went in there and the jury gave this, on that single cigarette, gave it guy life. I went back out and I said, "Now what is it you want to talk about?" He says, "Oh, nothing. They said, well, my man had one cigarette." That's Ralph Brock.
Yeah, right.
Ralph, he told that story 100 times.
That's right. And then you had another drug case involving a local attorney that you tried to change venue, did you not? That's federal.
Yeah, that's a federal case, but we tried it down in Fort Stock, Laleen Waters.
Right.
Fine guy, just fine guy. He got just in the wrong place at the wrong time and tried to help his brother out. And they found stuff on him, and I think he got 7 years to do, or maybe it's less than that.
We've all heard stories about some of these great lawyers, and you actually tried a case against the guy from Houston.
Yeah.
Name
Dick Gary?
No. Percy Foreman.
Percy Foreman, yeah.
Yeah.
He had that team with him. He had a great team, yeah.
What was it like going up against somebody like that?
It was tough because he knew he had control of the courtroom, and I mean he could take it over. And I would, of course, try to divert attention from him taking the courtroom over. And I'll never forget in that case, Percy, we got through with the argument, and I had my argument written out on a yellow pad, page, after page, and it was a pretty good argument. I had it organized real well. And I had even made a statement to the fact that they want to send that guy home with me for Thanksgiving. I'd take him home. That's how sane he was. I said he's not crazy, you know. Anyway, Percy, after the argument was completed, he walked over and he said, "Is that a copy of your argument?" I said, "Yes." I was quite elated that, you know, here he is the big dog. And he came over and he said, "Is that your argument?" I said, "Yeah, it sure is." He said, "Listen, would you do me a favor?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." He said, "Would you give me a copy of that?" Oh boy, I was on cloud nine. And here the best attorney in Texas asking for my argument. And of course, you know what he said afterwards. I said, "What are you going to do with it?" He said, "I'm going to use it for toilet paper."
That's good.
That ain't what he said.
No.
And then he walked off. But I had good relations with him all the rest of the time.
What's been the biggest change in the practice of criminal law over the years that you can think of?
I guess it may be discovery. We didn't give any discovery at all. I was saying the other day about that. I suppose that's the crux of it. Do you have a question?
No, but I remember when Alton was the DA, they wouldn't give you any written discovery, but you'd go over there and they'd tell you, or they'd read the offense report. You didn't even do that.
No, we didn't. Oh heavens, no. We had a different constitution.
What was your staff like when you were the DA?
I had three. Well, Bill Brister, remember Bill? And Bill was my first assistant. He came here from Dallas. He came from. I don't know where Bill was from. He's in Dallas now. Bill was a first assistant, and I had two other assistants and an investigator. And they were really good. Both the assistants have died since that time, and the investigators died too. Lefty Lassiter was my investigator.
How many district courts were there in Lubbock at that time?
There were 153. I think there was 4. We had about a caseload every January. We'd run in after the heavy holiday crime. We'd have indictments, 50 to 75 or 70, maybe 75 indictments in that month. And it took a long time even to wipe those out, try them. And I really, you're right about Chuck. I didn't try cases unless they were provable. And I just knew that if there's anything wrong with the case, they'd make it out. Somebody'd be lying. It wouldn't be on our side. And it worked out pretty good. I might have been. I've dismissed some cases I probably wish I hadn't.
Back in those days, the Court of Criminal Appeals would reverse a case once in a while.
Oh, that's right. In fact, they would. I'd never had very many reversed, but they would. I'm thinking of one Forrest Bowers tried. They reversed it on us, and he went down there and talked them in reinstating it. And there's a fellow named Bowers for indecent exposure. No kin. In the newspaper would always say, U.C. Bowers. No kin to the defense attorney, this Forrest Bowers. And I told Forrest, I said, that's adding insult to injury. Had them how to make a statement like that. Yeah. But they reversed that case, but Judge Morrison was one of the ones, sort of swing guy, and he decided he'd made a mistake. I think in that case they accused me of something that I was guilty of. I didn't get accused very often as a thing of guilty, but I did tell the jury, if you want to know anything more about this defendant, you come to my office after this trial and I'll show you.
You had you had a pretty active appellate practice, both as a prosecutor
Yeah.
and as a defense lawyer, didn't you?
I really had to, you know, the appellate lawyer in Lubbock was Clifford Brown, and he was good, and but he lost a bunch of cases. And had,
Sure.
you know what I mean? He had to defend them in the court, and he was very successful. But I didn't lose too many. The only case I lost as a district attorney was the one where the baby's nursing.
While you were in office, did you have more than one county?
I had 4 counties.
That's what I thought
Yeah, initially.
initially.
I had Cochran, Hockley, Lubbock, and Crosby. And we had those 4 counties, but after that, they put those 4 counties down as Brownfield and Terry County and so forth. And I left, as it is today, Lubbock and Crosby.
Because we're still
Yeah.
together.
Had a bunch of trouble out in Crosby County. I'll never forget the sheriff over there, one of my best friends, accused of doing things bad. And we tried him, and he got probation, which I was sort of glad he did, but that tore up that area quite a bit. You know, you put a lot of trust in a guy, and he just goes off the deep end. You worry about your judgment. You really do. I went to seminars with him, you know, that kind of thing. I really enjoyed being with him, but he just got to taking the wrong money and not getting. He got it mixed up with the county money.
Were there any death penalty cases when you were district attorney?
Yes, I had. We got the death penalty on this fellow killed. He's out of San Angelo, and fellow killed a dairy. What's the main dairy down there in San Angelo? Anyway, the milk truck driver, just cut his throat, ear to ear, and left him dead. And we got the death penalty here in Lubbock, but I don't remember why it was reversed. Then they got it again, so the guy did. It was executed, but at that time I don't know. We didn't have a lot of gruesome murders. You know what I mean? They were just. It took a long time to get racial murders resolved, but they were not high penalty cases.
Did you defend capital murder cases?
Let's see, Jimmy. I don't believe I have. I've been ready to, but I don't see any problem about it, except it. I think they've made more problem of it than it really is. But they do it on the basis of economic to the county and that type of thing. It is an economic burden, but I don't. As far as the lawyer, I think if he just does his job, that's enough. I don't think he has to go out and get. Nowadays, you better go to DNA and all that. You better.
What would be your message for young lawyers after a life of practicing criminal law? What would your advice be to?
Well, I'd say probably don't expect to win more than about 20 to 25% of your cases, if you're well prepared on all of them. You're going to lose them because this day and time it's a different situation, and the newspapers are influenced, and the media is influenced. This thing of putting a picture of paper, guys arrested today, and they got a mug photo of him in the paper that night, and then the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and all of them say he's guilty. But that's not right, and I think that we have more of that, and that's a problem that the young practitioner has to do. I wish you would take some action. Every one of those that come up, it had some way to show up public protest, not for the personal benefit of the protester, but just to say that's not the way the law was intended. You know, presumption of innocence has been wiped out by a competitive newspaper, television, and that's going to keep going. In fact, it's moved a long way since I was in office. I can't believe some of the things the newspaper gets away with, and television get away with it.
You, in one of those cases, we forgot to ask you about the famous red rope trial tactic. Do you remember that story?
Well, I hate to tell it. I was a little bit scheming in some of the cases. I got a bang out of trying to figure out a way to attract the jury's attention from the facts. And I didn't do it, nothing, I didn't tell them anything wrong. But what Jimmy's referring to is the day I went down to the hardware store and bought me a big coil of red rope. And I put it in my briefcase, and this, I do other things too, but I put it in a briefcase, and about time with the other argument would be going real good, I'd start pulling that rope out of my briefcase. And the jury started looking over and and I finally rolled it up over here, still more coming out in it. But I never did do that thing of putting the wire in a cigar.
Right.
They said I did, but I didn't do that. I wouldn't trust it. I think that'd be exposing you real quick. I didn't do anything. We had a judge out in El Paso that tried the case we were talking about in federal court, the lawyer. And that judge, he's a great man, he really was, but he went to sleep at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we tried till 5, So at 3 o'clock we'd start doing things. John Montford and I tried this case, and John said, "What else you got in your bag?" I had all kind of things in there. I had all kind of colored paper, and that, bring out something happened, you bring out a piece of colored paper real fast, and the jury notices those things, and it takes your mind off of what bad things. Jimmy, thank you. You're dismissed.
Are we got through? Anything else you want to say, George?
Let's see. Was there anything?
The last one.
If there's anything you'd like to be remembered by.
Yeah. What would you like to be remembered for?
I'd like to be remembered as a hard prosecutor.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a kick out of defending those guys, but I didn't, it wasn't like being trying to as a prosecutor, the good people think a lot of you. And I always went with the good people. I'm a 50-year Rotarian. I've got, I'm a 37-year AV-rated Martindale Hubble lawyer. I've tried to maintain real high standards. And not the rope pulling and all that, that's just a part of the trade. But I had to do something while that people were saying all kind of bad things about my client. That'd be like Chapel, Byron. I learned a lot from him.
You have a very wonderful family, and you've alluded to your beautiful wife, Louise. Tell us a little more about your family and the accomplishments of your children.
Yeah, I'm very proud of I've got 4 great-grandchildren now, and I have my granddaughter, Sheridan, is a lawyer. We have 3 generations of lawyers. My son is a lawyer, Ernie. And Greg is, of course, the most successful one of all, is my younger son. He sold out his business and made quite a bit of money, but he still has the business. He's the president of it, hasn't been that way ever since it happened in 1993. And each one of them have beautiful children. They're smart and they can be, and I'm just proud of them. I just don't see anything. In fact, my son Greg, who's the president of Professional Data Solutions down in Temple, which is was owned by Drayton, head of the Houston Astros. Greg's having surgery today, and this morning, of course, minor matter. But the family's been there's been no, I could not have had a better family. Very supportive, very supportive.
Are you still going down to the office? You still
Oh, yeah.
practice every day?
I go down every day.
Yeah.
I know I'm getting there later and later, but I enjoy going in. In fact, I don't know what I'd do if we didn't get to the office.
You still meet every Saturday with the World War II Breakfast Club?
I have a breakfast club on Saturday with that group with Bill Shaver and Forrest Bauer, a bunch of real keen guys. Then on Friday we have the past district attorneys meet for lunch. And then I have Rotary on Wednesday, and I don't know, it's something going every day, it seems like. I enjoy it.
Don't forget your FBI group.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the FBI meets once a month on a Thursday, and I sort of hit that and rambling up that a little bit. In fact, that's another thing happened here today. I really was feeling. Lee Stevens, a former FBI agent here in Lubbock, his wife died last night or yesterday. Did you know Lee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
We're real sad about that. And my next door neighbor of 37 years died yesterday. It's all hit at one time. I started to ask for continuance. I really did. But
Well, we're happy that you showed up.
yeah, well, it's a wonderful. TCDL has filled a gap, and it makes it equalizes things, and that's what was needed. Jimmy's assistant district attorney general, and it's, I guess you consider that as prosecutors.
Sometimes.
But I appreciate both of you fellas taking time to help me out here.
All right. Well, thank you, George.